Can you
And I
guys
guess,
hear me?
yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, good.
Yes. Alrighty. Well, we've got lots to discuss today. I guess, we'll start with just going through the agenda and we'll just do it, in order here. Update with the report writer. The selection committee has made a recommendation of the organization called 3PV. They're based they're based in Maryland. Uh, and I mean they seem like a very good, group of folks to be working with. So I think the Attorney General's office, staff are gonna go through the process of drawing up the contract, but those are the folks that we, will hopefully be working with. And yeah, I think, that will be good to have them in place for the coming year because yeah, they're going to be busy. Which again sort of gets us to the fun of, the institutional reconciliation hearing. Um, in terms of, well, again, at this point, I've been talking with Amy and Michelle Coles. And we've been thinking, that maybe we need to push the date of the reconciliation hearing back just so we've got enough time to do this. And so I was looking at dates, late March, early April, just to see if that would work. And so checking with venues, because the St. John's College was available and still is available on February 8th. UB Law School was available, but they're asking for money and a whole bunch of other things, just in terms of, the logistics of it, just make it look kind of problematic. So they wouldn't necessarily be a good option. Looking at April 5th currently, neither the Lewis Museum or St. John's are available on the 5th. St. John's is also not available on the 29th. They're going to get back to me about April 12th. So yeah, it's kind of up in the air right now. So if folks have ideas or thoughts, I'm certainly happy to entertain them. Um, if we end up going back to February 8th, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just means we're going to have to kick things into high gear pretty quickly. Another option, I know, Amy, you had sort of just mentioned possibly looking at, Baltimore City Hall, and City Council, or, I suggested perhaps going back to the county council chamber where we had the Baltimore County hearing for Howard Cooper.
And Nick, I also wanted to flag that we did also put in a request, we meaning OAG, we put in a request for the Thurgood Marshall Amenity Center. And we were able to hear back, and they did send over a proposal for pricing, and we may even have some funds to be able to cover that. So we
Okay.
will be talking
Where
about
is,
that in the next executive meeting.
okay, great. Where is that located?
So that is located at 2101 East Brittle Street. It looks like the address that's in the signature for Joe Sterling. That's who we've been speaking with. But if you look up Thurgood Marshall Amenity Center, it may pop up a different address for you.
Yeah.
It's in Baltimore. Did you say?
Okay.
I don't know if you said that, Trish. It's in Baltimore.
Yep, it's in Maryland.
In
Yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah. No,
Correct.
with Biddle Street, I kind of guessed it was Baltimore, but that's
Actually,
good to know.
Division Street.
Yeah, Division Street is what's showing up on Google.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to make sure that they have the capacity again, a space capacity. Because I know Baltimore County Coalition was looking at them for some to host something, and wasn't going to work out.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for being late. I hope everyone is well and had a good holiday. Um, so I just wanted to say, Goucher College, it is in Baltimore County. It's a nice space actually, and it has a lot of historic um, value there that I think could support this work. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Plenty of parking,
Mhm.
pretty accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project had their annual conference there last year. That worked out pretty well.
The
So,
Baltimore County Coalition has also used that space quite a bit. So, and I'm
Mhm.
actually adjunct there, so we have a little sway, very little sway.
Okay. Hey, if we've got any kind of pull, I am not beyond saying let's see what we can do. Um, but yeah, as I said, I'm still sort of actively. Oh, hold on, we just got a message from St. John's. Let's see, they can make April 12th work. They have a play happening there, but I think we could probably be out in time. The play later in the evening is very minimalist, but they're also available March 1, March 8, 15, and 22, April 12th, and April 19th. So we have some options there if we want to go with St. John's in Annapolis. If we want to stay in the Baltimore area, we'll need to do some checking and do it fairly quickly. I mean, I'm also, sort of quite happy to go to St. John's. Number one, because it's in Annapolis. Number two, because of the Henry Davis lynching. Um, it's not as convenient for, some folks as, being in downtown Baltimore or being up in Towson. But we've got, and they're willing to let us use their facilities for free as long as we, give them a St. John's banner sort of in the background, so that people can see that, and I figure that's a fair trade. Um, Thoughts, comments, criticisms?
It does seem like, excuse my voice, but it does seem like if there was a governmental office, like some of the ones you mentioned, that could help just symbolically by recognizing the governmental complicity and grounding it there, rather than just having it in higher education, which often is just dismissed. Although, on the other hand, if St. John's is willing to make this easy, I definitely think there's an argument there.
Yeah.
I have a question about the governmental entities because I know symbolically they would be great. Are they large enough is always, I guess, my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, Amy, do you remember how many people, what the capacity at the either at Goucher for the auditorium that we used or the county council chambers were?
Goucher actually has 3 spaces that would be feasible. One is like 500 or 900 seats. So that's massive. That's the big auditorium. The space that we used for the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project's annual conference last year is in their atrium student center, which is sort of nice in that if there were students coming through, they would actually be then exposed to that opportunity. And it's tiered. So there's like levels. Again, I think tiered is actually good so people can see and hear better. They have a huge back screen. So in terms of the visuals, it's really a great opportunity. I feel like that might be 100. It actually might be more. I'd have to double check that. And then there's another space that would be a little smaller, that's sort of like a smaller theater space. That might be more of a 80. I feel like one space might be 250. I might be making that up. So
Okay.
Baltimore's counties county council chambers, definitely 150, 200, 300, I think could get in there. I know that's a big range, but I'm not concerned about that as a size. I was about to Google Baltimore City's
Yeah,
chamber
okay.
or whatever I could find there.
Okay, no, that'd be great. Because I know the key auditorium at St. John's can hold up to like just shy of 600, so we would not have to worry about space or anything like that. And they've got a city parking garage across the street, that people would be able to use, so parking shouldn't be an issue. And again, it is, an accessible space, so.
And one more option that we're also still looking into is the Reginald Lewis Museum, right? Nick, is that out
Yeah,
or
they said that they don't have anything available on the 5th, or what was the other date?
they just emailed us 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
And they said they're going to send us a list of any available Saturdays in March or April. So
Okay, great.
we'll see what their availability is.
Okay, yeah, because I know that, what was it? She said that, second floor, yeah, I just saw this thing. Here it is. Yeah, they've got something happening on the 29th, and she was going to check on the 12th, and that's when I asked her, well, let's just look at all of March and April. So hopefully we'll have something,
Yeah.
one way or the other. But that again sort of raises the issue. Where do we want to do this and which date, depending on availability. Um, as I said,
I
yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't have like images. I don't know what these different venues, look like. I think all of us are familiar with one or two of them. And so we're kind of comparing blind. Um, if it were at a government facility, my one concern would be that people would associate the hearing with that government entity because we've had so many county hearings that are really local and that they may not understand that this is different. In a perfect world, again, without even knowing the Reginald Lewis space we're talking about, I kind of like the idea of Reginald Lewis because of it being a Black History Museum and and it seems to represent a more of all of Maryland type space, even more so than like a university feels like kind of a local place, a government place feels like a little local place. But the Reginald Lewis Museum is kind of the preeminent Black history space in Maryland. And so I like that idea of it. I feel like it's a venue that a lot of people are familiar with, would know how to get to. They do have a parking garage directly across the street. So that's available. So, but I'm not opposed to any of the other ideas. I think they all sound fine. I think I just have like a slight preference maybe for that one if it were to work out.
Michelle, I would echo what you just said about the Lewis Museum. I will also say they're challenging to work with and to partner with. And I mean, even just trying to get dates is, sort of an example of that. And maybe more, I'm sensitive to it because of several years of backstory. And I would think that the Lewis Museum in particular would be jumping to host this. I mean, right? It's part of the history, and they're the history museum. To me, that's a no-brainer. So instead of just saying, no, this date is taken, as opposed to, I'm sorry, this date is taken, can we talk about other dates, or we're
Yeah.
interested, can we make this work, or anything? Instead,
They
we're
seem to be
driving
there
in.
now. I know it's taken a little bit to get to that place, but the latest email as of 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm wondering, I'm wondering, Nick and Michelle, if this is something like I'm comfortable if the two of you run with this a bit. I don't feel like it has to be vetted by the committee thoroughly. I think, if there's ideas, if
Mhm.
something comes up, I would encourage it being locked in.
Yeah.
That is in line with the theme or the feeling of the conversation.
Yeah.
That's
I
my
mean,
2 cents.
sure. The other thing that I'm thinking about is food at the Lewis is going to be a challenge because They don't like having outside
Outside caterers.
folks come in for catering.
Yeah.
And St. John's, they said they've got a cafeteria, close by, and they can, that we'd be able to sort of, just go for that hour or whatever break we're gonna have. And it's like, I think $8-10, for an all-you-can-eat buffet. So, you can get in, get something quick, get out and get back to it. Um, you
And
know,
they don't have like a cafeteria at the Lewis Museum.
they Oh, they don't have it anymore? Because I know they used to have one that was, I mean, the food was okay. It was a little overpriced in my, but it's also been a few years since I've had that. But
I don't,
have they discontinued that?
I don't know. I just don't remember seeing one.
Okay.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah, as I said, it's been a few years, so maybe they've,
Maybe, but maybe we, if we're planning on doing 2, maybe 3 sessions, if we're doing this all day, maybe we just do an hour and a half break in between at a lunch hour and people just go, you know, there's got to be places to eat around there. I'm trying to think. I've been
yeah,
there
there are
before.
It
not
is. I
too
will say
far.
this to you, Commissioner Coles. Even an hour and a half, I think could be challenging for
Mhm.
people to go out, get bring back whatever. I think it could be challenging. I just want to say that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll, keep an eye for responses from Lewis, but um, I mean, I figure worst case scenario, we've got dates available at St. John's in Annapolis, and I think we could probably do worse, but I think it's a pretty good option. Um, I guess questions, comments, criticisms before we move on.
Someone I think in the chat asked if we had considered Morgan State.
Yeah, Michelle.
Sure.
Yeah, G had asked about that. Um, I mean, we could inquire. Unfortunately, Simone Barrett hasn't been all that engaged, who's, the commission rep from Morgan, but we could check, with Iris, who's also there on campus, and just see if that's a possibility. Because yeah, I mean, yeah, the Morgan alum, I would be happy to get back there. Um, so yeah, I mean, we can look into that as well. I just
Thank-
figured if we don't make a decision today, we'll need to do that over email. Just because again, I'm trying to keep this as open and as inclusive as possible here. Um, so
Whatever you all decide, I'm happy with. I think all of the options are good. I do think just, considering not only the historical aspect, but the capacity, the convenience in terms of parking and food, I think that should guide the decision. So I think all of the options that you presented, that you all have stated are good. And so I stand with Amy. I cede that to you all. I trust you on that.
okay,
I
well,
do too. I totally do too. One thing just to add, there will be that team talk course between Commissioner Fakunle and myself and one other Loyola faculty that'll be meeting alternating weeks at Morgan State and Loyola. And so we would have somewhat of a built-in student population if it was on the Morgan campus. I could also look at the Loyola campus if we'd be interested, but that would be another historically white college university, but I'd be happy to look into it.
sure. I mean, I'm not going to say no to any options. So if you would be willing to look into that, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so other questions, comments, criticisms? Okay, so moving on to testimony and who do we want to invite? Who do we want to subpoena? One thing that did come up in the it was Howard County, was that in terms of talking about newspapers, Marlena was talking about the sort of historical antecedents of the Maryland Daily Record. And she seems to think that it actually began as a local newspaper in Howard County. And so they may have some history there. So I'm thinking in addition to, getting the Baltimore Sun there, and again, one of the things I've got, sort of on the recommendations thing, just sort of saying, we should see if we can find if there are any newspapers that are currently publishing that have that history akin to the Baltimore Sun, that may have had some history of, producing, or contributing to the creation of the climate that encouraged and enabled racial terror lynching. Sherry Lynn Eiffel talks about, a lot of the local newspapers were generally much more approving of, the lynching that happened, even though they ostensibly condemned it. And so I'm just wondering if there are other newspapers, like, I don't know, if, like down in Salisbury, for example, if those newspapers, were publishing about lynching and doing all of that back in the day when this was happening, if we should maybe think about, including them or tracking them down and inviting them to testify as well. So I throw that out as sort of a long.
Could you say that, just that last piece again, inviting who?
Yeah, the publishers or the editors of those newspapers,
Right.
if they were, writing about lynching and, writing about it in such a way to encourage or support the whole process of racial terror lynching, that we should probably, call them in to hold them accountable as well, saying, okay, what are you going to do about this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Baltimore Sun published a big apology. That's great. That's wonderful. What are you doing about it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, symbolic, things are important. They have their place, but let's talk turkey here. What kinds of practical things can you do to, sort of, you know, to hold yourselves accountable, rather than sort of, the commission coming in and saying, we're recommending that you do this, let's start with how are you going to hold yourselves to account?
Mm-hmm.
You published this, again, just sort of thinking about, not Salisbury, but, Princess Anne, and again, sort of the way that those newspapers covered, the Armwood lynching, and basically just said, it's like, we're maintaining the silence, nobody's talking about this, and that was published in the newspaper. If that paper is still publishing today, I'd love to see them there. Just to say, how are you going to account for this particular part of your history and legacy?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes sense to maybe have like one or two local papers.
Mhm.
Um, I think we just have to be selective because we can't feature, and have too many witnesses on any panel. So if
Right.
we had someone from the Baltimore Sun, maybe we pick like the best another local paper, and
Mhm.
then maybe we also pick like someone from a society of journalists, and then make sure that there's also Black journalists represented on the
Yeah,
panel
if you
so that
get
we can
somebody
hear
from
from
the
them.
NABJ, that would be
Right. And then
awesome.
And then Amy, do you want to mention the Abel Foundation that you shared with us? Is that relevant to this?
Sure. I was in a conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago and was talking about this work, and they said, well, you should get somebody from the Able Foundation to testify, because the Able family started the foundation as a way, sort of reparations, as the original owners of the Baltimore Sun, thinking about what they could do reflectively and proactively, was how it was shared with me. And I guess I just hadn't made that direct connection. Of course, I know the Able family, but I didn't think about it in conjunction with maybe some of the history. So it could be interesting to to get in conversation with them, and either maybe a family descendant. I think that would be interesting, an Able family descendant, or somebody on the board. I'm sure there's Able family members on the board of the foundation, or maybe a staff person, executive director. So it would, I think there's a lot of different directions we could go with it. And maybe that's not so much that would be interesting. Is that about the newspaper, or is that now looking more forward about what could be done, or examples of what could be done, how one family is thinking about their legacy, good, bad, ugly, and what they, maybe sort of course correcting that. So in terms of the Sun, I mean, I think that it would be really interesting to have those journalists that actually wrote that article in 2022.
Mhm.
That, because they are the ones that did that research. They're the ones who wrote the history, and they're the ones who thought about the consequences and outcomes of the choices of the Sun back in the Jim Crow period. I know that they're not the owner. I know they're not the editor in chief. We're not going to hear what we would want to hear from those folks anyway. I really think it's that those journalists, I think there are 3 of them, if I recall, that would be really pivotal folks to bring in.
Mm.
And if we're thinking about different types of papers, in the Chicago papers published, they had their lists of lynchings nationally. Why did they do that? What was their
Yeah.
rationale for that? What, where's their outcomes? What were the outcomes of that? So again, like local, national, international, and being informed by what folks are doing, lessons learned, we can bring back to Maryland, and then Maryland can move the needle.
Mhm. Yeah, because it was the Chicago Tribune, if I'm not mistaken,
That's
that
what I,
did the annual
yep.
list of lynching. So yeah, that would be an interesting option as well. Let me see if I've got the list of,
There
yeah,
was
here.
a there was a Google Doc that you shared, and I could not access it.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, was it
It was in
the
the email you
recommendations?
sent,
Okay.
reparations recommendations matrix.
Yeah, that I thought I had given everybody access to it, but what I can do, oh, why are you not there? I am so sorry.
It's okay.
Um,
That's access to what?
the
This, the matrix that was in Nick's email for
yeah,
today's meeting.
okay.
Okay.
Ah, there we go, and we'll just hit share, and you should have access to it now.
Are we talking about the one that's called institutional hearing witness list? Are you talking about that or something else?
No, I was actually just getting ready to bring that one up.
Oh, okay.
But she was talking about the reparations recommendations matrix
Oh, okay.
that I had done, sort of taking all of the recommendations that we gotten thus far and tried to split them out into symbolic material reparations and then African American versus policy recommendations. And again, if folks have other ideas that they want to add, please do.
Yeah.
But let me see if I can pull pull up the institutional hearing witness. Yes, all right. I'm gonna.
Michelle, do you still have your team of interns that are helping with the transcriptions?
We have a new team that will be forming because one of the ones from the spring graduated, and the other is actually going to go to Ghana this spring. But I just got two additional people who will come on and start working on the two transcripts I have. And then we have still the funds for one additional one. So yes, we still have interns, but I think because of like not because of the number of hearings, I'm thinking they're going to be mostly focused on the transcripts.
Okay. I
We'll,
just was thinking about it because we just got a new transcript and I just wasn't sure if you were getting looped in as we were, are you getting those as we
Yeah,
get new transcripts?
I've been sending them to her. So
Okay, great.
yeah.
All
So I
right. I
got,
didn't want to double send it, so glad you.
yeah. But the Montgomery one we did not get. So if you have the Montgomery transcript, that would be great because of the two students I have, one of them is determined to like do as much as they can on winter break.
Okay.
So
okay, I will track that down and get that to you.
thank you.
I was I was at my literary agent had a party this week in New York and I went up to it and I was chatting with this guy and he told me that he writes on reparations and I was like, oh, that's wonderful. And I started telling him about the work of the commission, and I just now went on the institutional hearing witness list and I see his name on there, and I didn't even realize that at the time I was talking to him, because our interns, they gathered a lot of this information. And so I didn't know, like, I don't have everyone's name memorized, but he was Joel Edward Goza. And so just now I was about to add his name to the spreadsheet and it auto populated. And so I was like, oh, he's already there. So
Well,
he wrote a book called Rebirth of a Nation as a play on Birth of a Nation, the movie. So his is Rebirth of a Nation. So we're in email contact. And so I'll if we decide he's someone we'd want to have, at least we have a direct channel to him.
that's fantastic. And that also speaks to the work that the interns did getting that list together.
Yeah, because I was going to be disappointed if his name wasn't on there, but that was a good check.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess it's a matter of, again, just trying to figure out, who are the folks that we want. And again, I guess, part of that, will be determined by, all right, what's the schedule we're envisioning for this, since we're going to be going all day. But yeah, I'm greatly encouraged, to hear that. So, I mean, that says that we've got a pretty impressive list here.
Yeah. I think when we're ready, I mean, first things first is we lock down the venue. But once we have the venue locked down, I think it would be really good to just have a meeting where we talk about each person and and we make the decision. And if anyone has a personal contact, to know that as well, and just strategize a little more about how to go about it.
Yeah, and may I add, just you all may have this information, and I don't. And so Commissioner Coles, thank you very much for sharing kind of your criteria in terms of the expert witness. I think that for me, I looked at this and I saw that there wasn't a column to really talk about, because some of these people I'm familiar with, and I know some of them kind of share the same. And I didn't want to add it, I have to tell you, because it's not my document to add to. So I thought that, we would be having conversations. So Commissioner Coles, I like your recommendation about us going through each of the people on the list. I think for me, I would need to know more about how the commission is envisioning the day, because I'm hearing you all talking about panels. So I'm assuming, is one a panel of like the media experts, law. I don't know what that is. I
Mhm.
think that's going to determine how we select people for the panels. Is there, will the criteria include the numbers of people you want on the panel, the different perspectives? Should they be varying perspectives? Because there are some people on this list who have various perspectives about reparations. It's kind of more of those kind of tangible structural things that help guide, I think, who we may select to be on the panels because this list is growing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, and Michelle, correct me if I'm just like way out of line here, but I guess, as I was envisioning panels, I was thinking, akin to the testimony that was, that happened during the process to get the legislation passed to start the commission. Delegate Pena Melnick had like, she would say, okay, we've got, these 4 people sitting here providing testimony. Then they would do that, take questions and all that. Then they would move, they bring in the next group, who would then do it, but again, they were loosely affiliated in some way or some shit, so, and again, I
Mhm.
imagine we do something similar, like, okay, here's media folks, here's law
Mhm.
enforcement, here's, people talking about reparations, and we would sort of gauge, structure it that way so that, each session we're dealing with different aspects of it. Is that
Mhm.
more or less kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, topically,
Yeah.
and even within the reparations category, because that's how I split it up on the spreadsheet, to try to have the different groups to match the different panels. But there may even be multiple reparations panels
Mhm.
where we are trying to capture those different perspectives. Like there may be a panel that is focused on, I know you've mentioned like the on the ground, the advocates, where we're really hearing from the people in the community where they're saying what they want, what they need. And then maybe we're hearing, another panel is maybe the academics where they're talking about what they've seen, what has worked. Maybe, I mean, this could go on all weekend, but another one could be a legal panel where they're talking about how to structure such relief so that it can, withhold legal scrutiny and not get struck down by the court. So what are the pitfalls that we need to be aware of? And I could even envision another panel where we're talking to people that are further along than we are in achieving reparations for their state. So maybe we could have some of the California folks who've been stymied, but hearing from them. So that's just a possibility. If we were able to have someone internationally that that has done this type of work and put it into fruition. So those are just different ideas, but I would definitely think the panels would be topical and we would group together 4 or 5 people that could bring different perspectives to the same question.
And with that, Commissioner Coles, I wanted to ask, and this is for everybody, really. So in having these different topics, if we were to use like that prototype that you just laid out, are we looking that they're just reporting out because it's a hearing, or is it a conversation, or we're being in conversation with one another, right? Because if that's the case, I can even envision there being different perspectives on one panel that may focus on maybe X. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So, and then having people that have these different perspectives about
Yeah.
what reparations is and being in conversation with each other. Because one of the things that I just want to be a little mindful of is that when people hear academics, they automatically assume that they are the experts in the area. And I think people with lived experience have a lot of expertise, and I don't want their knowledge to be subjugated based on titles. And so, and it could be more experience with the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the ground. And I'm looking at how we could really kind of break that up, which is why I'm thinking about differing ideas or even different positions being in conversation with each other, but it would have to be facilitated expertly, kind of. So
Yeah.
that's just a thought that I'm having.
I could say what I was envisioning is that people would be reading their statements, their prepared statements, and then the conversation would be more so between the commissioners and the people on the panel. I wasn't necessarily thinking the panel would be having a conversation with each other. Although there may be certain questions that are asked that where they have a difference of opinion. One person may say it one way and another person may say, well, I don't agree with that because of this reason. Um, but yeah, I was seeing it more of like a conversation between the commissioners as we were asking follow-up questions based on what they presented on and based on whatever questions we had that we think that they would have insight into.
Okay.
But, obviously this is, open for us to all put our ideas together to see what we think would work best. I did have one question for you though, Stephanie. You had said that there was a column that you would have added that's missing. What would that
Oh,
column
I
be?
didn't want to, it was just when we wanted to give background on a person,
Yeah.
because I wanted to do that, for this meeting, but adding to the document.
I can add it or you can add it. You have my absolute permission to add it.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
didn't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
then,
yeah. Feel free to add it. The only thing I would ask is that no one delete anything.
okay,
But if you want to add something, feel free to add it, whether it's a new column or whatever. That's fine.
okay. The thing though that you raised, which I think was a really good issue that really would actually make me adding a column a non-factor at this point, is having that conversation where we go through each of them. So I don't have to add a column.
Okay.
I think your suggestion about us having a meeting and just going through each person and discussing it, I think is a good idea.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And I
Good.
do want
Good.
to add, if I can here, and I know this may be out of turn, I thought you all did an excellent job on the public hearing in Charles and St. Mary's County. I wasn't there physically, but I did watch it online and it was excellent. And I wanted to say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was
Big
the
props
liaison for
to
that one.
Michelle and Amy for the work that you all
Yeah.
on
You
that.
all did an excellent job.
It was excellent.
Mhm,
Thank you guys. And
mhm.
Nick obviously moderated it, and so we
Oh,
appreciated you
please.
stepping in
I
and doing that.
All of you did a
still
very good
have
job.
not looked at the recording because I don't want to hear myself as a blithering idiot.
It was good, Commissioner Creary. You all did a great job.
Thank
And I
you.
just wanted to say that.
I
I'm just gonna
appreciate that a
jump.
lot.
Thank you
Mhm.
for that. And but I think what was really interesting was the open public comment section
Yes,
was us just being quiet and listening.
Mhm.
I think that was
it was
really
good.
important in that space, and folks were able to almost dialogue with each other as much as with us and as much as with the topic.
It
Yeah.
So
was good.
I thought it was pretty powerful at the end.
When
It
I
was very powerful.
when I went to just kind of talk with people that were in the audience at the end, I think like the most common thing I heard from people is they felt very blessed to be there. And I thought that was wonderful. It's especially hearing that from like the elderly African American community, where
Mhm.
you could just tell that, they have not had many opportunities to tell their stories in a space like this where people would listen and they could be honest and share. And so it felt really good for them to have that venue and be a part of that witnessing of their truth. So I was really happy with it.
And I could tell just from watching, they were very happy about that. And I'm happy you all provided that space for them to do that. It's
It's
great.
almost ironic because it's such a depressing topic.
Yeah,
Everyone feels uplifted at the end of it just because you
yeah.
got to share your truth.
Yeah.
You think everyone would leave sad and angry and depressed, and it doesn't seem to be that way. People seem to feel like this is an important step towards healing. And and that's the spirit it's taken in. So
Yeah.
And that's the power of sharing stories, right?
yeah.
Particularly when they've been suppressed for so long.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just gonna quickly move us, to at least kind of take a look at the recommendations as I've got them on the matrix here. Just so you can see what that looks like if you haven't already. Um, that, and if you haven't read Michelle G's article, please do. It's awesome. Thank you for that, by the way, Michelle.
Yeah.
And as I said, I mean, honestly, I will probably try to share that with the rest of the commission on Monday because they need to read it too. But anyway, so here is what I've got so far, again, sort of the one symbolic recommendation there, for the posthumous indictments, but then, and again, just sort of the one on the material, but then when we get to the African American specific, because Counselor Franklin has, again, I think really pushed us to think about, reparations being specifically for descendants of American freed people. Yeah, so I've got a bunch of things. And again, if you all have ideas, and the other thing I put in there is just a rationale column, because I figure when and if it goes into the final report and hopefully gets translated into legislation, we'll have at least, something to say, this is why we're recommending this particular, item. And then we've got, a whole bunch of policy recommendations that, would be sort of more broadly. So again, my hope here is that we are going to be broadly inclusive, and not just an either or. I figure let's hit them with a both and just get as much in there as we can. But here again, if you all have ideas or suggestions, particularly for strengthening the rationale for some of these, that would be wonderful. And again, I figured the more that we can build this out, it's like, the easier it'll be to kind of just say to the folks at 3PV, here's the recommendations that we've got, sort of just based on conversations. And then as we, also, we'll look at that code book that Michelle and her students put together, as a way to kind of work through some of those things, particularly as, we sort of start dealing with things coming out of the hearings. Yeah, I just wanted to at least make sure that we've got, sort of a structured thing here that will hopefully facilitate our thinking about this and then sort of the preparation to get this stuff written up. So that's where this is. And please add your ideas, however, it's like out of the box or innovative as you might think. Yeah, it would be good to have those there so that it's not just, sort of primarily stuff coming from my brain, but, and again, I mean, there was stuff coming from the Baltimore County hearing as well, that was reflected in there. So as we go through, we can add more. If you think we need to have different categories as well, we can add those too. You all have editor access to it. So again, like Michelle said, don't delete anything, feel free to add, but don't take anything out. Okay. So what do we have? Okay, no. Still checking to see if we get anything back from Lewis. Haven't seen anything yet. Okay. Other ideas, comments, questions, criticisms?
Uh, um, sorry, I'm driving now, but as we're toying with the dates, do we need to be aware, at least amongst our group, of any blackout dates in the March, April timeframe? For me, the last 2 weeks of April, I think, are the last 2 weekends in April, I want to say, are my county's spring break. And so I'm planning to be out of town then. I believe it's the Easter weekend, and then I think it's the weekend after Easter. So I would just want to black out those.
Okay. Let me just pull up April quick. Yeah. Yeah, the 20th and 27th. That's fine. And as it turns out, those dates, yeah, the 19th would be available, but if we can, I say if we can take the 12th, that would work. There's calendar. There it is. Okay. Yeah. Because Palm Sunday, and then yeah, that's Eastern Orthodox Easter happening on the same day. Okay. So yeah, I would say but the 12th is Passover.
But Passover doesn't begin till the evening. So people who are very religious will be cleaning their house to get all the bread
Okay.
out, but
Okay.
it doesn't really start till the evening.
Okay. It doesn't start on the evening of the 11th then, or it starts on the evening of the 12th?
It starts on the evening of the 12th. So, and the night of the 12th.
Okay, so we are good. We can, and the days will be getting longer, so, we can probably finish before Passover actually begins, if we go for the 12th, at St. John's. Because right now it looks like they're the only ones that have availability on the 12th of April. And again, I figured, this should definitely, give 3PV enough time to kind of start working on the history side of things, to start building out those updated case studies for each of the 38 cases. As I'm thinking about this, I figure if they take the first 6 months, do that part, and then get around to dealing with reparations and recommendations and all of that, the second half of the year, that would be fine. At least as I'm thinking about it. So yeah, the more that we can kind of front load things, that would be good. But yeah, I will, keep checking for a response from the Lewis. And yeah, I think we should be able to make some decisions sooner than later, hopefully. And
I think it would be nice if we could have, if the state's attorney would be invited and maybe attend this hearing. And also, I'm sure we probably can't get the governor, but if we could get someone senior on his staff to attend and be present, because at some point we're going to need some political support to pass these recommendations. And so it would be good if we could get them, really invested in seeing what we're doing. So it's not just a report on paper to them, but it's something that they can draw back on
right.
to understand the urgency.
Yeah, and that would be another, I guess, bonus of staging it in Annapolis. We'd at least have other folks from the legislature, hopefully in and around, who'd be show up.
That is a bonus for Annapolis. Yeah, it would be easier to maybe get maybe the Speaker of the House, or at least someone from her staff.
Yeah,
If we could get them to attend.
yeah. That, and as I'm thinking of it, yeah, because we could get them, damn, I just lost it. Oh, I hate when that happens. But yeah, I think that would be helpful. And again, I think it would also, yeah, because if we do it in April, and again, early to mid-April, that's also going to mean that we'd be doing this while the legislature is still in session. So that should hopefully also encourage some of those folks to show up.
The one
Nick,
thing
can
to
you
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, in terms of Passover, I don't think there's a legitimacy issue because it starts in the evening. But one thing to consider is if some of the people that we're hoping to invite or subpoena are Jewish, that could be an issue in terms of getting them. So that's just one thing to consider.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry to have joined a few seconds
No,
later.
that's
What
okay.
date are we talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, Pam and Jim from Carroll County Coalition, yeah, which means basically, yep,
Our
it's time to
meetings
kind
are
of start
merging right
thinking.
now.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, this is Reconciliation Committee. We're talking about the
Oh, okay.
for
I tried to figure how
yeah.
our hearing interfered
Oh,
with
oh, no. This is,
okay,
the 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 joys of scheduling back-to-back meetings and using
yes.
so sorry about that. But
Nick, I know we have to wrap. I just wanted to ask, I couldn't remember. I know you were having conversations with the State House, and I know it didn't work out. Was that because they weren't in session, or was it an absolute it wouldn't work out?
It was more because they, again, looking at the date in February, they were saying that, Saturday wasn't going to, I mean, in general, I think Saturday wasn't going to work for them. And so,
Okay.
well, how about doing it on a Friday evening? I was like, yeah, that ain't.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So it was a no-go on a Saturday. Got it.
yeah.
Okay. So maybe St. John's. Okay.
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 Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, as I said, I'll wait to see what comes in from, from the Lewis Museum. But, and then based on that, we'll figure out, sort of what the next step would be. But yeah, I think we've got a good option with St. John's. Let's see what else comes in. And, I will just say thank you all, for taking the time and for contributing. Again, I think we've got some good things happening. We just need to lock down a couple of things, and yeah, let's get this moving. So thank you all.
Great.
And those of you who are here for the Carroll County meeting, I'm gonna stop. Well, let me stop sharing, and then what was it? Yeah, stop the recording. There we go.
Hmm.
So we'll do that, and